Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a This Year in Perfume Ranked Edition from 1998. So first, if I sound a little hoarse, I have been a little bit under the weather, so bear with me. Probably after this, I'm going to go straight to bed and try to take as much vitamin C as I can. But these videos are important to me. They are something that keeps me in a routine, and I love doing them for you guys. And so hopefully you'll learn about some new fragrances that I've been loving, and I promise you the top spot will be a shock to you on this video. So, before we hop into it, let's do scent of the day. Today, for the very first time, I wore the new Sherwood creation, which is a house that I've really been talking about on the channel lately and very positively. Unfortunately, this one is really not my style. It's probably my least, I would say, fragrance that fits me from the Sherwood collection. The name of the fragrance is actually called Gentleman, and I did wear it to work. You can see the guy in the suit in the background, and here's the note listing. And if you know my taste, you know a couple things about me. So number one, all of these animalic notes that are listed in the base, I love when they really come forward. And you know, I love smelling things like the castoreum and the dirty ambergris and leathers. And this fragrance, even though they're extremely muted. This is really a pleasant, proper, when it says gentleman, think about a gentleman that doesn't want to offend anyone, right? And at work, you know, it's a nice fragrance for work, but really what it smells like to me is it smells like a very high quality lavender with some citruses that sort of morphs into this green tea fragrance. And I must admit, I don't have any fragrances in my collection that have that sort of green tea feel. And there's some other flowers in there. There's some champaca and things like rosemary and you know, holy basil and all of these different notes, anise and oak moss and all this stuff. But really, it kind of comes across as a lavendery, citrusy, fresh, unoffensive green tea fragrance. I don't get much of the castoreum or anything like that, unfortunately. So for me, this is probably my least favorite Sherwood fragrance so far. The others, Vetiver Royale and SAR, were much more to my speed, if you will. Not that it's a bad fragrance, but not something that I would personally go for with my taste. But I will wear it more and review it for the channel. So that is Sherwood's Gentleman. And I actually really like the packaging on these. The packaging is high class all the way. Especially for the price that you're paying. So that is Sherwood's Gentleman. Okay, so before we hop into this ranked list, and this is going to be a top 17, okay? There are some samples in here, but samples that will get discussed on the channel. So this is going to be a top 17. Before we get into the fragrances, though, let's put ourselves in the 1998 state of mind. So for me, there's a couple artists that really scream 1998. So think about things like Usher, all right? So Usher had a big hit, Nice and Slow. Or think about Will Smith's Getting Jiggy With It. If that doesn't take you back to 1998, I don't know what does. And then, of course, on the movie side, there's not very many big hit movies from 1998. Things like Meet Joe Black and I think Urban Legend and Fallen and those kind of movies came out in 1998. I Can't Hardly Wait, but the one that stands out for me, because I went to actually go see it in the theater with my uncle, who is now deceased, rest in peace, Uncle Thor, is Small Soldiers. And I remember Small Soldiers, I was in New York visiting him when it came out, and I got a chance to go see it in the theater with him. And he had all kind of health problems. He couldn't, you know, eat popcorn at the theater because of, you know, diabetes, and he had cancers and all this terrible stuff, but he lasted way longer than the doctors thought. But I love you, Uncle Thor, and actually wearing this in honor of you. But I'll tell you, Small Soldiers is an absolutely fantastic movie for a kid, for a family movie. The soldiers come alive. They're like toy soldiers kind of thing, and they come alive. And I actually really enjoyed it as a teenager, whatever you want to call it. But I think it was more the experience of going to the movie with my uncle than, you know, anything else. So that is one of the movies from 1998 and some historical events. So if you're not big into movies, or if you're not big into songs, the major event in 1998 that probably sticks out in your head more than anything else is the Monica Lewinsky scandal. There's absolutely no way anything tops that. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. And there were some other highlights, like, for example, when I think back to 1998, sports-wise, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa just popping home runs out of the park like it was nothing comes back to mind. John Glenn returned to space. The FDA approved Viagra. And there were other things that kind of, I guess you could point to. There was, I think Pakistan officially went nuclear in 1998, which prompted sanctions from other countries and all that good stuff. So, just a frame of mind. Now that we're in the 1998 frame of mind, let's do this top 17 countdown. So remember, before I get started, just a quick little rehash of the way that this works. This is my personal opinion as of today, as of 9:39 in the evening, Thursday, September the 19th, okay, 2023. So keep in mind, my opinions change, feelings change. I'm not saying number 1's better than number 17. I'm not saying number 2's better than number 16. This is just my personal ranking right now, and I have very specific tastes. So there are some in here that you're probably going to look at that are towards the bottom and go, that's one of the greatest fragrances. I love that fragrance. I'm not bashing it. I'm just saying for me and where I'm at in my journey, this is my ranking. Okay, so let's get started. Number 17, I don't have a bottle of even because I really despise this fragrance. I don't like it. And it's not that it's necessarily a bad fragrance. I really hate the historical aspect of what it did to this once great house, because this is from the house of Hugo Boss, and this is called Boss Bottled. Okay, so Boss Bottled is actually done by one of my favorite perfumers of all time, Anique Minardo. And Anique Minardo is an all-star perfumer. The great Anique Minardo is how she's referred to in the Ram's Head. But Boss Bottled took the House of Boss, which had these amazing hits. Think about Hugo Boss #1. Think about things like Boss Spirit from the late 80s. Boss Spirit. Chris from Scentland calls this Sunshine in a Bottle. This is dark, green, bitter. Oh, and it just dries down to this hardcore leather. Brilliant perfume. My favorite Boss is Hugo Boss #1 from 85, which I don't think I have a bottle here that I can grab and show you. Yes, maybe I do. Maybe I do. Let's see. Okay, so there you go. Hugo Boss #1 from 85 is my all-time favorite Hugo Boss scent. And then it almost goes in chronological order, because then it goes Boss Spirit, and then finally you would have something like Boss Sport. So 3 of the greatest, you know, just home run, home run, home run. The first 3 at-bats for Hugo Boss. And then they started to do some weird stuff. Boss Elements fell off a little bit, but I think it's a better fragrance than Boss Bottled. And then in 1998, Boss Bottled came out. And it's one of those gift and a curse, if you will, for Hugo Boss, because it was such a big hit. And if you've never smelled Boss Bottled, I'll basically break it down for you like this. Boss Bottled is a apple pie in a perfume bottle, is basically what it smells like. And up until 2016, Procter & Gamble made the fragrance. I don't know who makes the current fragrance, maybe Coty or something. So this is actually a Coty sample. So some people say, oh, if you get the older ones, it's bigger and thicker and all this stuff. But I honestly don't care. Just that sweet vanilla in the base with that apple pie, fruity thing. Not my favorite fragrance. Way too sweet for me. And I hate what it did to the house of Hugo Boss, because it was such a big hit that all they started to do was pump out flankers. There's probably 10 million Boss Bottled flankers. And so that's the reason it's number 17 for me. Obviously, there are worse fragrances, but in the context of what it did to the house of Hugo Boss, absolute nightmare. It took them off of this path of, you know, to my mind, fragrance prosperity. They were on the path to being one of the greatest fragrance houses of all time with Hugo Boss #1, Boss Spirit, and then, of course, Boss Sport, one of my favorite sport fragrances of all time. And they just nosedived directly into the mountain with Boss Bottled, at least to my taste. Now, if you're somebody like Joy Amin, who loves sweet fragrances, that could be one of your favorite fragrances of all time. But for me personally, not my cup of tea. That is actually why it's so important to sort of know your fragrance reviewers' tastes, right? So when you see these ranked lists, you have to remember a couple of things. Many of them paid for almost like an advertisement in the list. Some of the houses actually pay to have their bottles in those lists. So take the lists with a big grain of salt. You know, that's number one. But number two, you really have to know the fragrance reviewers' taste when you're checking out those lists, because, you know, if you just go off and blind buy what somebody like Joy, who loves sweet fragrances, has on his list, it's going to be completely different from what I have on my list. I'm not picking on him. He's just somebody that I know has a sweet tooth, right? He loves his sweet fragrances. So just something to keep in mind. Excuse me whilst I hydrate. It's been a brutal day. Okay. Number 16. Number 16 on the list, we've got a fragrance from probably what I would consider one of the most underrated all-star perfumers. He did things like Balenciaga Pour Homme, Akitos, just amazing fragrances from the house of Alain Delon and stuff like that. Gerard, the great Gerard Anthony. I've got a perfumer's portfolio video on him if you want to kind of check out more of his work. This is probably my least favorite Gerard Anthony, and I don't think it's necessarily fair, because I think it's a good perfume. It's a spicy floral type scent, and it's done in sort of this 90s. There's a little bit of this synthetic freshness with a little bit of this dirty woodiness, if that makes sense. Almost like there's cumin in here, but there's not any cumin. There's cedar in the base, and there's rosewood. Rosewood's one of my favorite woody notes for men. Well, not just for men, but many masculine fragrances will use that rosewood. And here they've mixed it with geranium, jasmine, bergamot, and grapefruit. So it does start sort of citrusy, but it turns almost, excuse me, like I said, you'll have to forgive me, into this spicy floral kind of thing. And so Salvador Dali, Le Roi Soleil Homme from 1998. Now, to its credit, probably one of the greatest bottles of all time with the Sad Sun. I absolutely love the Sad Sun. I think Salvador Dali's artwork was ingenious, and if you've never sort of, I would just, if you're interested, go to YouTube, type in Salvador Dali, and just watch some of the hour or two sort of episodes on his art. Just fantastic stuff. He was a weird dude, but I think he was a genius. So that's Le Roi Soleil Homme at number 16. Number 15 is a fragrance that, you know, many reviewers that I really respect and love rate this very highly. Some of them gave it a 10 out of 10 and that kind of thing. For me, it's one of my, it's a fragrance that I maybe understand, maybe it's just not to my taste, but I'm not a fan of this. In fact, every time I've tried to wear it, and to be fair, it's only been a handful of times, a couple times, but every time I tried to wear it, it almost makes me sick to my stomach. But I can respect the composition, and I do think that there's some layers, and I understand the era that it's built in. 1998, you have to remember, hot on the heels of things like CK1 and stuff like that. And so this is from the house of Hanae Mori, and Hanae Mori has a fragrance called HM. And for the longest time, many people thought this was going to be discontinued. It is still in production according to Parfumum. This is sort of a sweet lavender. So it's like a sweet lavender with this chocolatey, patchouli, vanilla, tonka base dry down. And the sweetness, again, I think is what gets me. Again, so if you're somebody with a sweet tooth, these two fragrances that are towards the bottom of this list, Boss Bottled and Hanae Mori HM, which is a listed in Parfumum as a masculine release, but I think that this was marketed unisex, if I'm not mistaken, because that was sort of the thing back then, you know. And Hanae Mori is a Japanese house, and so this sort of wears like a Japanese fragrance, even though it's got some heavier notes, there's this light quality to it. Look at the color of the juice, right? There's this light quality to it, and it's extremely powdery. That's one of the other things that put me off. The powder in this, I really feel like is overkill for somebody like me, and I honestly do think that this would smell better on a woman. But Hanae Mori HM comes in at number 15. Number 14 is Back to a Decant, and I will do a full review of this fragrance before this decant is used up. I promise you, this is a decant from the great Amouage at Enchanté, and this is called Good Life for Men. Now, Good Life is one of the discontinued fragrances that was created by the great Pierre Cardin. Pierre Cardin actually has back-to-back fragrances in the 1998 list. So Good Life is probably one of the better fig designer fragrances. You have to remember Good Life came out right around the time of things like Dior's Dune, right? And so this sort of fig for men, green, and of course Pierre Cardin sort of mixed his melony, what is it, C10 aldehydes, or that sort of melon aldehyde thing that him and Edmund Rudnitska used so well in here, with some violet, magnolia, geranium, almond, clover, lemon, amber, sandalwood, and a tea note underneath. So think about it, fig leaf and tea. So interesting sort of green notes, and I do think it's a good perfume. I'm not bashing it. I just would not pay anywhere near what is being offered on eBay. To try to find a bottle of Good Life, you're probably going to have to come up with $400 or $500. Seriously. It's insane, especially if you want one of the big boys. Maybe you can find the small one for $300, but just a absolute insane price rise on many of these discontinued fragrances. Some of them are worth it, and I'll tell you when I think they're worth it. Some of them, I don't think they're worth it, and this is one of them. But I do think it's a good perfume. Good Life is a good fragrance, a very relaxing, you know, if you look at it, it's got this yellowish green tint to the juice. The box is green, and there is this sort of, you know, green, fresh. I think it's perfect for spring. Pierre Cardin was sort of hot on the heels of his fresh phase, right? This is a decade after Cool Water, but he was still going for the ultimate freshness, and he really created fresh fragrances like no one else. So it's a great perfume, and I will review it, but unfortunately, I think there's many better from 1998. So Good Life for Men comes in at number 14. Number 13 is the Pierre Cardin that just edges out Good Life for me, and it is Live Jazz. Now, Live Jazz is sort of a fragrance that was a cheapie. It was a throwaway fragrance. It was a fragrance that was just sort of put on discounters for 20 bucks for the longest time 10, 15 years ago. No one wanted it. And then once stock dried up, of course, prices skyrocketed. Now you're talking $200, $300 for this 50 mil, and God knows how much for the 100 mils. But Live Jazz is sort of this fresh citrusy fragrance that starts off very minty with this bitter lemon rind-like feel. And the mint, grapefruit, lemon rind sort of mixes with this coriander, which coriander can sometimes come across as having a little bit of a aldehydic, sort of slightly metallic feel when it's really overdosed in here. It adds a little bit of spiciness to it as well. There's a reed note and a rhubarb leaf note. And the rhubarb leaf is a unique, distinctive note in this fragrance, along with a base of cedar, amber, and vanilla. So it sort of has that, you know, designer, woody, vanillic dry down. And Live Jazz, what's interesting, this is a bottle that was created by Sanofi. All right, so this is when Sanofi was distributing YSL. And believe it or not, this was still the better phase of YSL. I mean, it wasn't Opium and Koros good, but YSL was still a respectable house in 1998. They have since absolutely Stuka dive-bombed themselves directly into the earth. And what is happening with YSL, it almost tears my heart out. I think it's one of the houses that, you know, you would put it up there with the greatest houses of all time. To me, YSL was up there with the all-time greats, the Chanels, the Diors. And L'Oreal absolutely, if the Big Lebowski guy was here right now, he would say the plane has crashed into the side of the mountain. It is absolutely destructed at YSL. Even their, you know, niche line they're charging $300, $400 for, to me, not a single one is full bottle worthy that I've smelled. Absolutely horrendous quality. And that new thing they put out, YSL Myself, my God. So yes, I would say YSL is in big, big trouble, but back then, they could still put out a good fragrance, and Live Jazz is a great example of that, especially if you like Pierre Cardin style, right? There's that Pierre Cardin, again, freshness, citrusy, perfect for a hot day. You can spray away, that kind of thing. Like I said, apologies. It was a long day. Okay. So, next on the list, we have a fragrance from the house of Jacques Fath. And this is probably one of the best recommendations that Jeremy ever had. And if you go back and watch Jeremy's old videos, there was a time he actually loved perfume, believe it or not. And he talked about perfume. And, you know, instead of like bashing himself on the head with a bottle or spinning and falling down or, you know, talking about he just saw the Holy Ghost after smelling his arm. There was a time when Jeremy actually loved perfume. And one of his recommendations comes in at number 12. I didn't buy it off of his recommendation, but after I actually got on, I had a YouTube channel within the last couple of years, I actually talked good about this fragrance. And someone said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but Jeremy actually really hyped that early on in his YouTube channel days. And I said, no, I had no idea. But apparently he really liked this fragrance, and I think this is maybe the best Jeremy fragrance recommendation ever. I can't say what else he's recommended, because most of it's Versace Eros and Sauvage and shit like that. But I got to give him credit on this one. He found a good one. And unfortunately, it's discontinued. So if you go for this, this is Jacques Fath pour l'Homme. Get the one that looks like mine with the big sticker. There's a smaller sticker that's sort of reformulated, and the cap looks different. It almost looks like a gunmetal. Go for this one if you can, because I hear that one's been reformulated. I've never smelled it, but if you get the newer one and it doesn't seem to perform or smell as good, you might hunt down the vintage. But I think this is a great fragrance for a designer. So Jacques Fath pour l'Homme came out in 1998. Of course, it wouldn't be on the list. And it was done by Olivier Guillotine, who has a pretty damn good resume for a perfumer. Not many people talk about his stuff on. He did things like Tobacco Vanille, Tobacco Oud, Dior's Higher, which no one really talks about, but I do think that's a good fragrance. It's one of the reasons I don't really care to try the new Dior Ivera. He did a bunch of stuff for Tom Ford. He did Cristal for Women by Balenciaga and Fougère Platine for Tom Ford, which I would love to smell. So he's a respected perfumer, let's say. And Olivier Guillotine created this in 1998, and it's sort of this spicy, sweet scent that does a lot of things. So if you've ever heard my review for the fragrance Antidote, I said Antidote by Victor. Actually, I haven't reviewed it, but I've just talked about it on the channel. It sort of does a little bit of everything at different points in its life. So sometimes the fragrance is spicy, sometimes it's citrusy, sometimes it's floral, sometimes it's woody, sometimes it's, you know, incensey, all of this different stuff, right? And that's how it is with this fragrance to me. And in fact, I would say if you want a much cheaper, in the ballpark, okay, in the ballpark creation, if you like Roja's Middle Eastern line, he's got a fragrance called Saudi Arabia, or the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, excuse me, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And this will get you in the ballpark to me. This does a lot of what the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia does. That goes a little bit more traditional chypre, and there's some weird notes in there like cotton candy and strawberries and stuff like that. But this has raspberry, and this has lavender and floral notes and spices and frankincense. So there's that incense sort of dry down here with woody notes, patchouli. There's this mintiness in the top, and I love the juxtaposition from the minty, citrusy, woody top to this fruity, raspberry, oriental style, you know, musky dry down, ambery dry down. It's an oriental fragrance is really what it is, and it's got some power behind it. I really, really like this fragrance, and this is one of those guilty pleasures for me, I would say, because most people think I hate all sweet fragrances. I just bashed multiple sweet fragrances. Here's an example of a sweet fragrance I actually really like. So, guilty pleasure, sweet fragrance for me from the house of Jacques Fath pour l'Homme. From 1998. Brilliant. Sad it's discontinued. Glad to have a bottle. Okay, so that is number 12. Number 11. Now, before you crucify me for putting this at number 11, I want you to bear with me. So number 11 is Serge Lutens Muscs Koublai Khan in the vintage bell jar, Palais Royal version, the one stuff people go crazy for. This is it, and I will review this. And it is one of the best musk fragrances that isn't put out by the House of Bortnikov or Aries Ladore. Those artisanal musks, which are basically, they're using real musk, right? This is probably one of the best musk fragrances where I don't think they're using real musk in here. This is muscatone or something like that. But what they've done is they've mixed it with these animalic notes that I love. Castoreum, ambrette, beeswax. There's a costus root note in here, which is a very, very hard note to use. Some people say costus gives off this sort of warm, woody, musky, earthy, almost like a wet dog-like feel, almost like human hair or wet dog. And I talked a lot about costus when I reviewed Eigner's Super Fragrance for Men from 1978. That is a fantastic animalic fragrance no one talks about. But there's this costus note in here, so, and labdanum, of course, and real ambergris and all of this expensive stuff, civet. So you would think this would be like a dream fragrance for me. And in a sense, it sort of is, except I have some bad memories of this because an ex wore this. Believe it or not, I swear to God, an ex wore this as her signature scent in the early 2000s that I dated. And it's just weird. You know, I've got that memory attached to her, that specific person. And usually I don't have that with any of my fragrances. But this one in particular is so unique. I could almost pick it out immediately. And I've smelled some of the other ones like Kiehl's Original Musk, and I actually own Carnicure by Marlou, which I think is an inferior fragrance to Musc Koublai Khan through and through. So I've smelled some of the ones that are supposed to smell like Musc Koublai Khan, and it was Musc Koublai Khan that she was wearing. It has a very distinctive, very hard to recreate that. And I will wear this and talk about it one day on the channel, but that's the reason it's here and not higher. This sort of resinous, oriental, animalic, musky fragrance would definitely be higher if not for that strange sort of association that I have with it. Okay, so that's number 11. Number 10. There's actually two versions of this in my collection, the Eau de Parfum and the Eau de Toilette. When I first got into this fragrance, I thought I liked the Eau de Parfum more, okay? And the more that I sort of wore both, my feelings switched. And that does happen sometimes, okay? So, my feelings switched. And the reason they switched is because the Eau de Parfum and the fragrances from the house of Boucheron, and it's called Jaipur Homme, probably the best Boucheron fragrance in my opinion. Jaipur Homme, I don't give ratings, but if I did, this would be like a 10 out of 10 for value for money. The fact you can buy this for 20 or 30 bucks blows my mind. Again, the great Annick Monardo. Sorry, I don't like Boss Bottled Miss Monardo if you ever watch this, but I think you've very much made up for it with stuff like this. And she has a very distinctive style with this sort of oriental. If you've smelled some of her other fragrances, you know, if you've smelled Body Koros or if you've smelled things like D Squared Potion, you know exactly what I'm talking about. She has a very distinctive sort of chewy, oriental, tonka beanie, coumarin-like, you know, benzoin-y, dry down. And that's here. But this opens up spicy, powdery. This is actually a, you know, tester. So it says a sensual and modern spicy oriental fragrance. A fresh opening followed by a spicy accord softened by an intense and woody signature. And it does go woody in the dry down. So you get a little bit of spices with the clove, and you get this patchouli and cedarwood, spicy nutmeg, which keeps everything in the box. You know, old school spicy green carnation with that big vanilla note. And I think this is a beautiful, spicy, cinnamony, you know, oriental fragrance. One of my all-time favorites. But my feelings switched on the Eau de Parfum, because the Eau de Parfum sort of focuses more on the chewy, heliotrope-y, sort of benzoin-y oriental style, whereas the Eau de Toilette goes more into the citrusy sort of top notes of the bergamot, lemon, and lime. And because I'm in Texas and 9 or 10 months of the year, it feels like it's hot, I started leaning towards the Eau de Toilette. So Jaipur Homme, the Eau de Parfum, comes in at number 10. But just know you will see the Eau de Toilette coming up very soon. Okay, top 10. Well, that was a top 10. So number 9 is, again, an Annick Monardo. So we actually had two perfumes by Pierre Cardin back-to-back. Now we have two by, Annick Monardo. This is Bvlgari Black. And this was one of the most daring designers, I think, in 1998, because it's leathery, and it's got this green tea bit, and it has this rubber tire-like smell. And in the early 90s, that was a daring release to have this leathery, with her vanillic amber accord I just talked about with some woods. And so it's green tea in the top with bergamot, and then this sort of rubbery leather that smells like like this like the rubber around this bottle might smell. And I really like this fragrance. I think it's a great fragrance. Someone on Parfumo says it's very avant-garde, and I do agree, but I actually have come to like Midnight in Paris even more. That's the Olivier Polge discontinued designer from Van Cleef & Arpels, and they both sort of play in the same sandbox, but you can't go wrong with either one. So Bvlgari Black, the original, before there was Bvlgari Man in Black, there was Bvlgari Black, the hockey puck, or tire, or whatever you want to call it. Just a brilliant perfume from Annick Menardo at number 9. Number 8. Number 8 is an Hermes, and again, you guys might be shocked it's this low, but we're getting into the big hitters here, boys and girls. So, number 8 is a vintage bottle of Rocabar. I can't say it without saying it that way. Rocabar. And Rocabar is also sort of this benzoin-y creation to me. I get a lot of benzoin and oriental touches, but it's cut with things like oak moss and fir. So it's sort of green. There's juniper. So, you know, juniper is used to sort of spriten up gin. So there's this, a little bit, you know, this freshness in the opening with coriander, lemon, and bergamot. And then one of the key notes in this that I think really sets this apart. It really sets it off. And it adds this sort of coniferous quality to it, is the cypress. So you have that green cypress mixed with the fir I talked about earlier, mixed with the oak moss, and it all blends into this sort of vanillic, benzoin-y stew. But the spices jump out, the cypress really jumps out. Cypress can have a little bit of a medicinal vibe, and you can definitely get that here. But it's unique because it almost sits on this purple-smelling oriental. And the reason I say purple is because there's little touches of violet in here. And so, you know, violet's a very delicate flower, but Parma violets can sometimes come across as having this almost like this powdery floral vibe, and there's a little bit of this spicy, woody, powdery, you know, floral thing, very delicate violet note in here if you really pay attention. And this is a Jean-Claude Elena, before Jean-Claude Elena was in-house perfumer at Hermes. Gilles Rami and Bernard Bourgeois created this with Jean-Claude Elena. So this was a couple years, I don't remember exactly how many years, but before he ended up taking over and becoming the true in-house perfumer at Hermes. But Rocabar, up there with my favorite Hermes fragrances. It just can't get close to Eau de Hermes, and of course Bel Ami will always be at the top for me. It's probably Bel Ami, Eau de Hermes, Bel Ami Vetiver, then Rocabar, but I don't think I've ever ranked my Hermes fragrances. But if I have, you can guarantee you'll have Bel Ami at the top, but Rocabar is very, very good. I'll review it one day. That's number 8. Number 7 is a decant, and I recently did a review yesterday, actually, of a Guerlain, and the Guerlain was called Ambre Eternal, the Eternal Amber, and it's a discontinued Les Absolutes d'Orient. I always forget the damn name of that line, but it's one of the discontinued ones, and it's one of my favorite from the whole line, up there with Bois Mastidio and Encens Mathique and stuff like that. Or Songe du Bois de Et, if you wanted to go back before it was Bois Mastidio. But this is sort of in the same line as Ambre Eternal because it has this sort of salty ambergris, big ambergris with amber. Okay, so it's both. And many times in Fragcom, there's this debate. Is it ambergris or is it amber, right? That's like the Ambre Nuit debate. Is it ambergris or is it amber? And this has both, just like Ambre Eternal does. But I think this is even better than Ambre Eternal, to me. As much as I love Ambre Eternal, and there's those little touches from, you know, the Guerlain and the Dry Down and all that stuff that Thierry Vasser did, little incense-y stick thing. And it's a really interesting sort of orange blossom thing he did. Go check out my review if you're interested. But Profumum Roma's Ambra Aurea, and I have a decant. I think I have another decant floating around somewhere. But man, I've tried this on a couple times, like to bed. Haven't worn it as my scent of the day yet. My God, what an amber. What a house. I am absolutely knocked over by the house of Profumum Roma. Profumum Roma, to me, is a house that I have been very, very interested in. Very rarely do I find a new house, and I know they're not new, but they're new to me. Very rarely do I find a new house where when I'm checking out their new fragrances or fragrances I haven't smelled before, I'm stunned by every single one I've smelled. Every single one. I've done videos on patchouli, fumitis, Fior de Ambra. That's a fantastic opium style oriental. If you like opium, try Fior de Ambra from Profumum Roma. And now getting a chance to try Ambra Aurea, absolutely knocked for a 6, I'll tell you that. So Ambra Aurea comes in at number 7. Could climb even higher as I get to know it more and wear it. Like I said, it's been a long day. So that was number 7, Ambra Aurea. Number 6 is back to the House of Boucheron. It's raining and lightning outside, so hopefully we don't get cut off. But back to the House of Boucheron. This is Jaipur Homme Eau de Toilette. And this is a vintage, so that's why it's sort of frosted around the outside. The new Eau de Toilettes are clear around the outside, whereas the EDPs are frosted. That's an easy way to tell if it's a vintage. If it's an Eau de Toilette and it's frosted, it's vintage. And this was actually created by Boucheron Parfums right there. You can sort of see. Boucheron, before Inter Parfums or any of those companies own them. And I am in love with this fragrance, man. For $20, or what did I pay for this? I paid like 28 bucks or something. Excuse me. One of the greatest oriental fragrances I've ever smelled. It just has this draw about it. Everything from the bottle design, sort of representing the doorways of the buildings in Jaipur, and of course, Annick Minardo just sets everything off. She places all of the notes beautifully to come to your nose. And so, Jaipur Homme, the heliotrope's a little turned down. It's not as powdery. It's not as chewy. The vanilla and the tonka don't feel as thick and rich. It feels just a little bit more versatile. And I've just fallen in love with that citrusy opening. Man, it is, maybe I'll do a comparison video one of these days. But what a fragrance. Jaipur Homme Eau de Toilette. The vintage. I don't know if the new one's different, but the vintage is out of this world. Okay, number 5 is probably the fragrance that got Jean-Claude Ellena the job at Hermes. This is Cartier's Declaration. And Declaration is a straight-up homage, a thank you, a salute to the great Eau de Hermes. And, you know, if you've smelled some of his work, you will smell Eau de Hermes over and over and over and over. And actually, it's funny because Eau de Hermes really sort of, I think, set the stage for like the next 100 years of Hermes perfumery. I know that sounds crazy, but it came out in 1951. So I could easily see it influencing Hermes until 2051. Easily, you know, lightning. We're already 2023. And I think when Jean-Claude Ellena released Declaration, I think Hermes paid attention. And they were like, dude, this guy is releasing an Hermes fragrance in our #1 competitor, like Cartier, right? And they snatched him up, and he got the in-house perfumer job, and the rest was history. Of course, he creates Terre and all that stuff. But Declaration is a very interesting fragrance because when you look at 1998, you can see these are not the type of fragrances that came out. This sort of sweaty, birchy, spicy, you know, woody. This was not what was coming out in 1998. And so, you know, Jean-Claude Ellena really went against the grain, and people loved it, shockingly. The spicy, woody fragrance took off. And it's a straight-up salute to, a straight-up, you know, thank you to Eau de Hermes and also his teacher. You have to remember that Edmund Rudnitska had a couple pupils outside of his son, obviously. Michel Rudnitska, his son was probably one of his greatest teachers or students. But, well, I say that in the father-son relationship, right? Probably his greatest student was a toss-up between Jean-Claude Ellena and Pierre Bourdon. Probably Pierre Bourdon. But Jean-Claude Ellena is right there with his repertoire. And, you know, this is, I think, sort of a thank you to Edmund Rudnitska, not just for Eau de Hermes. You know, this is sort of also a personal thank you to somebody who took a young and up-and-coming perfumer under his wing. And, you know, Jean-Claude Elena, I don't think got the treatment, the hands-on treatment that Pierre Bourdon got. So he really took to heart everything he could. He soaked every single word up from Edmund Rudnitska, and the result is this. And it's a beauty. I mean, this is a modern bottle, and it's fantastic. You know, they've done a great job keeping it proper. Now, the cumin may put you off if you don't love cumin, but I have come to really love the note of cumin, and I don't think it goes sweaty on me. You know, if it does, oh well, it doesn't bother me. If it bothers other people, that's their problem. I love Declaration, but that's number 5, Cartier's Declaration. Number 4, many consider this one of the greatest designers ever. This is Gucci Envy for Men. And you can hear it probably, it's raining now like a mother, so no running for me today. My God, man. Gucci Envy for Men. I mean, somebody asked me, is this worth $300? Because that's what they're going for, $300 or $400. And the thing is there is no fragrance that I think you can go just to the counter and buy and spend $300 that will do what this does anymore. And it's a shame because this was a designer. And, you know, Gucci was in good hands at the time. Jean Guichard is the perfumer who made this, but Tom Ford was the creative director. And so this is sort of this spicy, you have to remember there's a lot of ginger in this. So there's this ginger sort of peppery freshness with rosewood. He uses rosewood again and again and again. Tom Ford loves rosewood. It comes up in oud wood, of course. There's a big hunk of rosewood. But it dries down to this sort of leathery, patchouli, and you can see the color. It's sort of green, but the greenness really feels like it comes from this fresh, gingery, how would you describe it? Like this gingery pepperiness, like this spiciness. And it's very unique. I love Gucci for Men, Envy for Men. And one of these days I'll do a full review of this when I'm in the good frame of mind. Okay, next on the list. Again, many would consider one of the greatest designers. Bottles of this go now. We're talking $500, $600, $700. Don't pay that. I mean, it's good, but it's not that good. But it is very good. This is Dolce & Gabbana's By Man. And By Man, I was able to find a partial thanks to the great Amouage, and look how much juice he kind of saved me in there. I mean, just beautiful stuff. Way more than enough for me. And I got this for under $100, so thank you, Amouage. Man, I mean, By Man is, I think that By Man is almost like sort of standing at the precipice and looking out the abyss and seeing what is around the bend in perfume, because this is an Alberto Mordias creation, according to Fragrantica, I believe. They don't list a perfumer on Parfumo, but Fragrantica actually has Dolce & Gabbana. I'm stalling for time because I'm trying to look it up. Dolce & Gabbana. Come on, man. Fragrantica is such a... I hate Fragrantica. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, here it is. So, 1990... See, Fragrantica says 97. Parfumo says 98. I always go off of Parfumo. And as far as the perfumers go, Fragrantica says no one anymore. They used to say Alberto Mordias. They both took him down. Both Fragrantica and Parfumo took down the perfumer as being Alberto Mordias. That's very, very interesting. But what I was going to say about By Man, just sort of talking out loud here, is By Man has one of the most interesting lavender notes to me. Just my personal opinion. And somehow there's this sort of Hedione note in the top, which is supposed to be very attractive and project. You know, Hedione is supposed to something that's supposed to project, and it's supposed to give off this soft floral, almost like smelling like maybe a synthetic jasmine, right? With this peppery nutmeg leaf. Okay, so it's pepper, nutmeg leaf, green artemisia, and lavender. And the lavender is so creamy and smooth. It's almost like a designer version of Invasion Barbar, right? To me, it's like a designer, like a weird designer version of Invasion Barbar. Invasion Barbar came much later, and it's a niche and all that stuff, and it's different, I know. But the lavender, oh, sorry about that, Cap. The lavender in By Man and Invasion Barbar is so unique in just how smooth and silky it is. And they've mixed it with a note of ambroxan in the base. And the Ambroxan gives it this throw. Like Hédion wasn't enough. So it's Hédion, Ambroxan. And it's almost like this peek into the future for me. Because there's old school touches in here, right? There's stuff that you would expect in an 80s masculine fragrance. There's Gaiac wood, which has a little bit of like this barbecue-y feel. There's leather in the base. There's sandalwood and amber. And most importantly, Artemisia and lavender and nutmeg, right? All very vintage masculine notes. And then it's sort of blended with this Hédion, which I know Hédion was used in Eau Sauvage and stuff like that. But mostly the Ambroxan. So the Hédion-Ambroxan combination make this fragrance feel like you're just peeking into the future, just pulling back the curtain just a little bit to see what the future holds. And I liked what the future held here. I didn't like what it actually became with Bleu de Chanel and Sauvage and all that stuff, but I really, really like this one. So, yeah, if you ever sort of a sweet lavender, if you're a fan of those type of fragrances, and you go to an office and you dress like this every day, check out By Man. It's fantastic. So that leaves only 2, and you're probably going to be shocked, but I don't care. This is honestly how I feel right at this moment. Number 2 is an Amouage, and it's a discontinued Amouage. It's a Silver Crystal Man. Okay, so Silver Crystal Man is the precursor to Amouage Silver, which I think is still available. And Silver is sort of this floral, woody, slightly spicy because of the clove, and soapy. And it's almost like this cleaner, soapier version. If you were somebody who, let's say, didn't like Goldman with its huge, powdery ballroom, yeah, I mean, civet, and just, this is just fine French perfumery epitomized, right? And you were somebody who said, you know what, I really like that. I just need it to be toned down a little bit. I need it to be a little easier wear. I need it to be all of that stuff, but I still want to smell the amazing Omani white frankincense, and I want to smell that rose ylang ylang combo that Amouage does so well with the spices and woods. This was your answer. And damn it, it is beautiful. Everything about it, from the bottle with the old school Kanjar dagger, to the, I mean, look at the decorations on those old Amouages. It's almost, it's like something you'll find in the Aladdin, the cave Aladdin goes into to find the lamp. It's beautiful, stunning. And the fragrance is really good. The only reason that this fragrance is not number 1 is because of my personal taste, and sometimes this fragrance gives me a headache, sometimes. And it's hard to pin down because I love the fragrance, but sometimes I'm like, man, I just can't wear it. It's just too much, you know, because it is big. It's still big, even though it has the woody soapiness added in with Silver Crystal Man. It's still a really big fragrance. So, okay, number 1, and you guys are going to fall over probably. Most of you probably have never even heard of this fragrance, but I am in love with this entire line. Every single one is a banger to me, and I have to give credit where credit is due. Armando turned me on to this. He's got a hell of a nose, man, and we share the same taste. So Armando said, Ramsey, you have to go check this line out. In fact, there's the entire set, okay? If you know what's coming, you know. There's the entire set. It's the only one in the world I've ever seen. Grab it. It's like 200 bucks, you know. And I did. And so I got 5 25 ml bottles from the house of Pierre Cardin. And this is from the Centaur line. Okay? So most of them came out in 1996. So this is 96, 96, 96, 96. This one is 1998. Okay? So this one right here is called Centaur Tete d'Or. Tete d'Or. Look at the bottle. I'm going to tell you right now that this fragrance is... this fragrance has a little bit of Antaeus in it. And if you look at the black, it'll make sense, right? The marketing that they tried to do with this. There's a little bit of Antaeus in here. And when you spray it, what comes to mind at first is this old school oily machine leather mixed with spices, and then all of a sudden the fragrance starts to turn green. Okay, so imagine like a green, spicier designer without the Chanel sort of, you know, spooky rose that sort of just comes out. And I love that rose in Antaeus, but I don't think there's that spooky rose note in here, that haunting rose note. And God, the spices, man. Imagine like taking the spices in MCM Success, which is a huge spicy fragrance. Take out the honey and add in this almost Antaeus castoreum thing. It doesn't go as big into the castoreum like Antaeus does in the dry down, but this style, this sort of resinous, I bet you there's myrtle and maybe even a little bit of myrrh in here. There's no note listing, so I have no clue. But this sort of leathery, spicy, green, vintage style leather fragrance that Pierre Cardin put out in 1998, Tete d'Or, no one talks about, discontinued. My God, I've been wearing this to bed the last couple days. I am in love, absolutely in love with this fragrance. Stunning. It's stunning. And it's a shame no one talks. I have no clue who the perfumer is. It's very limited, so, I mean, people are probably going to watch this and look for it, and good luck finding a bottle. If you find one, snatch it up reasonably. Some of these you'll find floating around eBay. Like, I got these 2 extra ones. So this is actually different than Tete d'Or. So you see the black versus the gold. So this is actually different. I got this on Mercari, the blue one, for like 20 bucks. Like, they didn't even know what the hell they had. They're like, what is this cheap ass old cologne? So people, you'll still find bottles floating around at a good price. Every single one from this line, without fail, I'm telling you, every single one is a hit, is a straight up hit. They don't have a loser in this entire line. No one talks about it. Some of the best designer fragrances from the late 90s, no one talks about, because they're just very rare and hard to come by. But I adore them, and I not just for the collector side of things, because I know they're hard to come by, but the scents themselves, stunning, absolutely stunning. And Tete d'Or is much closer to the top than I first thought whenever I went through them. So that's my #1 fragrance right now from 1998. Sorry for the little under the weather. Tried to really push through for you guys. I hope you loved the video. We kept it under an hour. Thank you for the support. Thanks for watching. Thanks for everything you do for the channel. You know, I honestly love making these videos for you guys. I'm going to keep trying to make them as long as I can. And, you know, just leave a comment. I love the interaction with you guys. I'll be back with another video tomorrow. Cheers. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.